Good morning, everyone. I'm Tim Lake. I'm the Director of Public Sector for Cisco Systems right here in Texas, and I'm thrilled to lead this panel. I think we can go ahead and sit down and get comfortable. We know these people. They're friends of ours. And today we're going to talk about bringing global thinking to our smart community here in San Antonio. And I'm joined here with a fabulous panel. I've got Clint Vince from Denton's, Chelsea Collier from co-founder of DigiCity, and someone who needs no introduction, Paula Gold-Williams from CPS Energy. So as we get started, Clint, I'd like to start with you. How do you even define a smart city that embraces global thinking? What's a global smart city?
Well, our law firm created a think tank to try to address the answer to that question and also applications. We have about 350 thought leaders now globally. Paula Gold-Williams co-chairs our energy pillar together with former Secretary of Energy, Dr. Ernest Moniz, and we have 14 other pillars. And what we discovered as we researched, trying to come up with an answer to your question, there's been a lot of evolution in the definition of smart cities and now connected communities. Smart cities started out really as a technology play, looking at the impact that the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence, sensor technology would have and could have to facilitate a city's development. Now, our definition really considers more of a total infrastructure modernization concept for cities. So it includes digital infrastructure, which would be the topics I just mentioned, but also physical and very importantly, social infrastructure, governance and the community fabric here. We've discovered that social infrastructure is lagging behind a lot of the technological development, but that all three of these issues need to be really carefully integrated. And working in different cities, we've added a couple of really vital words to our definition. So for example, 5 years ago even, we wouldn't really have emphasized resilience. Now we look at it not only for turbulent weather, but also cyber. Fred Bunnywell, the extraordinary Chief Security Officer for CPS Energy, has told us that CPS gets hit with 2 million cyber attacks a day, plus with the Iranian intensified conflict, an additional 50 million hits a month. Now that's
tough.
Unbelievable.
CPS has to be right the entire time, and those attackers only have to be right once.
That's a critical point. And so CPS has done something better than any utility or really city I've seen so far, and that is the work they're doing with Joint Base San Antonio. Equitable became a word in our definition because the digital divide you've heard in San Antonio is maybe as great as 25% of the population that doesn't have broadband. Well, I know that CPS and I know the great government leadership here with, you saw Brian Dillard yesterday and Emily Royal and their team. They're looking at what do you do to get broadband to the people that don't have it? And what do you do so that smart city development is not just for the affluent, but it's for everybody? And then I'll stop so that the other panelists can really contribute, but there are a few other words, secure, meaning you really need to look at privacy and data sharing in a way we never have before. Waterfront Toronto almost blew up over the word privacy. Google did not focus on the fact that privacy is a human right in Canada. And so that now increasingly has to be taken into account. So I'll stop there.
Well, you mentioned something that was mentioned yesterday, the digital divide in San Antonio, and you brought this up as well. So when we think about that digital divide, I mean, you and Brian both cited that 25% stat. What responsibility do the people in this room have to help us bridge that digital divide?
Well, we are a sophisticated country, let alone thinking about individually here in San Antonio. We have to bring everyone along. Every child has a perspective and a view and an ability to contribute. I'm from San Antonio, born and raised. I grew up on the east side of town. I never thought I would do the things that I'm doing. To be in a room full of brilliant people with great ideas, this didn't happen. But it doesn't matter where you come from. We've got to create a foundation where every child has this opportunity. We have a strategy about this community because people here are our neighbors and our friends, and in some cases our relatives. And so our perspective is we provide this power to everyone, and it has to, as we evolve it, reach all parts of San Antonio and all mechanisms. Again, even when we're talking about energy, we also bring in education. We are doing outreach across San Antonio to programs and school districts talking about what are we doing and what does technology look like. Most people, most young folks are getting excited about solar, and they're emotionally connected to solar, which any way that we can get them talking about it is wonderful. But really, we have all of these opportunities in terms of new innovation, and we want people to help us, again, not just put in something new in a place where there's nothing. We want them to help us think about, again, San Antonio, and how do you move this whole community from what we have today without losing power in terms of conversion and building. So for us, it's just got to be part of the dialogue. And in many cases, we need to start there. Even when Eric and I are talking and other CEOs are talking, it's one thing that's stopping us about just running out on the digital vibe and doing 5G. We want someone to come in here and care about every market, every part. We don't want inadvertent redlining, right? That's a bad term and people don't say it. But it happens when the money is being chased in one part of your community. We say when you bid, we want to make sure that you're going from the east side, where I grew up, from the south side and the west side, to make sure that we don't end up in that situation where it looks all advantageous in one place and it looks like a desert elsewhere. Because San Antonio is good because all parts of San Antonio need that help and have contributions. So.
You mentioned something there that, we're not starting from scratch. And this is a historically rich 300-year-old city. I think you said that yesterday. So I'll go over to Chelsea. Around the world, are there any lessons to be learned from cities that are also a few hundred years old?
Absolutely. And, I consider it quite a privilege to be able to run around the world and look at all these best practices. I want to take a second to celebrate the leadership locally here in San Antonio, because, Clint, I think you did a beautiful job of defining a smart city, and it's ethereal. It's very difficult to define. And, Paula, what you're talking about in terms of inviting the private sector in and also defining how you want them to participate in helping you to build a more connected community, that is exactly what I'm seeing different communities around the world do successfully. And there's also a long list of communities who are not quite there yet. So two that come to mind on opposite ends of the planet, one is Singapore. And it's not quite fair to compare Texas and the U.S. to Singapore. Singapore is a city nation, maybe 5 million people. So to us Texans, that feels pretty small. But what they've been able to do is align on all layers of their government. And they've aligned around what they are creating a smart nation. And they don't just define that as one particular unit as in charge. It means that from the highest level of leadership down to every single resident, everyone understands not only what it is, but that it is a priority, and that there are 3 different sections that are all connected, which is smart governance, smart economy, and smart society. And that's a three-legged stool. None of those operate in isolation. So that's just one example, and I can talk about Singapore for the rest of the panel. Smart Docklands in Dublin. This is another really interesting example where Dublin, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago, was not economically exciting. They were having a really hard time, and talk about a digital divide. But they all came together and created this united smart test bed that is now called Smart Docklands, right in the heart of Dublin. And they're able to unify and use technology as an enabler to help raise all of those boats. So those are two very easy examples, but there's lots more.
Yeah, and I've been struck here in San Antonio how much the community is willing to work across silos. And it's not like that in every community. And where we don't even call them silos, we call them individual cylinders of excellence because we don't want to offend anyone. So when you look at that competitive advantage that we have here in San Antonio, can you share a little bit, Clint, about the work Denton is doing with CPS, crossing some of those silos, working more as a collective?
Yes, and I agree with your observation in Chelsea's that CPS is special, and San Antonio is special when you look at what other cities are doing. And also, we have major offices in Singapore and Dublin and Amsterdam, and I really agree with your assessment. My teammate Emma Hand, who's sitting up front, co-chairs our think tank, and we're looking hard at what these cities are doing well. With respect to San Antonio and its ability to bridge, I mean, it starts at CPS with Paula. I don't know if you heard, but the CPS, just in the last couple of days, had the highest approval rating of any municipal entity in all of Bexar County. So everyone at CPS should really kind of take a deep bow on that one. And of course, it starts with the leadership. Paula, I don't think it's that well known here, but she just received the industry's highest Trailblazer in Energy Award by S&P Global Platts for, in large part, work that she's done bridge building on. So to come back to your question, things like working with the Joint Base San Antonio on cyber, that's a huge development you don't see anywhere else. And it not only allows funding sources and educational cross-fertilization among the different groups, but it also is going to allow San Antonio to be much, much safer with reference to not just its military base, but the whole community than most other communities. Paula's vision of having really, and this is another important development in our definition of smart cities, where we're moving beyond just the mega metropolis to the other subnational political subdivisions like counties and suburbs and communities. But now Paula's vision is to really develop a corridor between San Antonio and Austin that would include initially all of the consumer-owned electric systems. Because what you discover with respect to electricity and mobility and advanced telecommunications and all the things we really all care about, decarbonization, it's not simply a siloed issue now. And what I really like about your question too is, in contrast to many, many other cities, the problem that is stifling a lot of other cities is the silos and the turf and the inability to really work together on a unified and integrated basis.
So it sounds like CPS and Paula, you're killing it. And a lot of that comes from the willingness to work across all of these organizations. Now, Chelsea, I think we talked about this before, both organizations work around the world, and some countries don't have that issue of silos because there's just one. That's right. And they might have a little easier of a deal. Can you talk about the cultural differences and regional differences we might see around the world in implementations like this?
And I'm glad you brought up that question because it's really easy in today's political climate and just what we're dealing with worldwide to be able to say, oh, it's not us, it's them, and create kind of these finger pointings of we do it right and they do it wrong. And what I hope that we can all collectively do here today is say, okay, maybe we're not all coming from exactly the same place, but perhaps there are some best practices that we can learn. So I was fortunate to do an Eisenhower Fellowship studying smart cities across the US and in China. So I traveled to 5 cities in China. Not one single one of those cities was less than 10 million people. It's a scale and a size that is hard to imagine unless you're there. And so it's easy to look at China and have some criticism about what they do and how they do things, but think about trying to manage a city of 24 million people when you're talking about Shanghai. Yeah. And you start to think about what I think other US cities and certainly European cities are realizing is that cities are now becoming platforms. So if you can think about that in terms of a best practice and not get nuanced in terms of very specific use cases, platforms that then invite all sorts of different sectors, social sectors, public sectors, private sectors, individual entrepreneurs and innovators to come in and be able to solve these community challenges through the platform that is the city. And I think China is doing that really brilliantly. Again, I'm not a China apologist, I'm not a China celebrator. There are lots of conversations to be had around that, but we can look at terms of when China says this will be done, it is done in a very fast fashion, and
which gives them an advantage. I don't think we're looking for that type of quick result here in the,
exactly
in
right.
the U.S.
We would love it, actually.
What?
We would love that quickness.
We would, but still, with voting and democracy and all
really
those,
important
all
things.
Those little things that get in the way of us all agreeing on the same thing.
But the best practice is that from the federal level to the municipal level, state level, regional level, everyone is aligned and on the same page. That is the best practice that we can take away. How it's done, that gets a little stickier.
So I'm going to, getting everyone on the same page and working together is a theme across this as we bring in that global thinking. And I think yesterday you said, getting to the future takes time, but it'll go a lot quicker if we do it together. I'm going to ask the same question I asked before. What responsibility do the people in this room have to join this and get the future here sooner?
Well, I'll start with the same thing. I mean, it requires everyone to be thinking about this and putting every effort you have to be part of the solution. We run a model. So I came up with a model and strategy. This stuff is in my mind all the time. We have a model called the quarterback model. And in the quarterback model, the individual excellence zones that you talk about, that are not silos, these excellence zones.
No, individual cylinders of excellence.
Cylinders of excellence,
yes,
even
yes,
better, right?
yeah.
Sounds beautiful, right?
Yeah, I can make anything sound
They're
good.
not allowed.
Yeah. That's why I'm the moderator.
They are organic and they manifest all the time, but they're not allowed. And I tell my team, we can't be spectators in a team sport. Right? You can't be on the sideline. I mean, you can, right? But what are you doing? If you're on the sideline waiting for something to happen, if you're on the sideline complaining that we should have gone completely right and instead we went left, but we never looked at the fact that whatever we did, we gained yardage, that's ridiculous. So I think everybody owns this, and being creative. And the other thing I'm talking to my team about, it's yes, under what conditions so we can help everybody else move with us. It can't be no all the time. It can't be just someone thinking about criticism for every sake. I want to say the way we look at it is, like I listen to all the things that happen, and not to be critical. To say that affordability doesn't matter or reliability doesn't matter, I get the fact that the whatever was said, that you can pick something. For us, everything matters. Because when I went to a grocery store and I did an event. There's a new book written with an author about enough, and they're trying to teach young girls that they can do things that they never imagined before, and they're not supposed to feel like they have to be in one perspective or not. There I am, the CEO, go talk. I walk up in the grocery store, and she's like, nice to meet you. Who are you? They don't care. They shouldn't have to care that I'm the CEO of CPS Energy, but I do care about what they're working on and what they're trying to do at the grocery store and what the connections they're trying to make to young people. So there isn't a part that doesn't matter. And the last point I'll make is, for us, I'm a big movie buff, so I like movies. Matrix, Matrix Reloaded, Matrix Again.
They're coming back.
Well, another Matrix, I will be there to watch it. I'm a big movie buff. But I do think that the way that movie talks about everything's connected to everything, and the choice of being conscious about reality and where you are and not in some other alternate universe that makes you feel comfortable, but everything around you really isn't how you see it because you're choosing to do it a particular way. The matrix means something to us, the landscape, the connections. And we're to the point where, again, I'll point out one of our board members, Trustee Gonzalez. We had a brand new committee that she heads up on innovation and technology, all the way at the top. The board, with her expertise and knowledge, she runs a company called Webhead that's been around for over 25 years. She sees it. She has connections to military. We're thinking about innovation, everything from tell us what we could do different with plants and operating systems, air capture, capturing carbon, new technologies, not just lithium ion. Talk to us what's happening there, and also talk to us about products and services. There's no limit. We want people to come in and care and bring your thoughts forward. Now, it's very hard for the utility to take in all that input, but that's the job. That's the job. Our board cares, I care, our leadership team cares, our employees care. They're asking for new technologies in terms of what's happening, but we're not a tech company, we're tech enabled. That's huge. In other words, we can apply technology in a way from pilot to scale that is meaningful, and we can get the impact and the perceptions of customers at the same time. It's a beautiful system here because we know that everything is connected to everything. So, please think about San Antonio in the long run. One of our goals that I've put out for our organization is we want to pilot stuff. We want to look at it. We want to challenge it. We want to compare it to what we currently have. We want to talk about how do you move 2 steps forward, or maybe you move 100 steps forward. And we ultimately envision that San Antonio could be a great place for people to bring and demonstrate and bring so much thought. And that's why everyone matters here for us.
Well, I love that Matrix analogy. It definitely made me a little more paranoid. And I can't remember if I'm supposed to take the blue pill or the red pill. Which is the right pill? Take all the pills. That's what we're sending out to the audience. So you talked about, but in addition to the Matrix paranoia, you talked about the idea of getting out on the field and taking part. And so we've got a lot of people in this room, and I want to open it up for questions in just a minute. So however we do that, if you raise your hand or what have you, if you have a burning question, we'll let you do that. But there's a lot of people in this room, from the private sector, the public sector, education, you mentioned tech companies, a lot of different resources in this room. Chelsea, you've kind of been in the middle of the public sector and private sector working together around the world. Any advice on how we all work together a little better?
Show up and tell the truth.
Okay.
I think it's really important to do that.
All right, apparently we have a lot of people that have been lied to out there.
I love this. No.
Yeah.
When I go out into the world and people are asking me, what is one of the most exciting cities in the U.S. relative to smart cities, I agree with Jan's assessment of L.A., but I talk about San Antonio, and one of the reasons is exactly what you've heard here on this stage, is because there is a welcomeness and there is a willingness, and I think that the difference between cities who are connected and smart, digital, whatever term you want to use, and those who are not quite there yet is the willingness of leadership. And yes, it means leadership at the very top, but it also means leadership within ourselves. And if we have one thing that we have to do. We have to show up in our communities and invite them to do better and show them that it is possible, and look at communities like San Antonio and use some of their best practices as ways to get there.
Yeah, I think using San Antonio as an example, and you referenced something there around the feeling you get in San Antonio. And I live in Texas, and everyone who doesn't live here kind of seems to think of Austin, and that's a cool city. But there's something special that happens when you sit down in San Antonio. I don't care if it's at the rodeo or up on stage here. There's a calmness and welcomeness that comes from San Antonio that's special, that I don't think you can recreate. And you hear it in the passion of all the speakers here today. Do we have any questions out there? Do we have the ability to take questions? Am I going off script? I should have asked before we did this. Is there a mic?
There's someone queued up.
Anyone?
I'm from Austin and appreciate the comments about Austin, but I wonder how can we work as a region better? Y'all bring a lot of perspective, appreciate all you've had to say, but our region doesn't necessarily seem to connect well. How could we fix that?
I'll go ahead and jump in. Clint touched on it. We have been building on this concept of regionalism because your city matters, but your region matters, and we are creating this corridor between San Antonio and Austin. There's New Braunfels, there's LCRA that has a state footprint in the transmission and generation business. And we are getting more and more focused on how do we optimize across our region. And we also think that we'll be able to push this down all the way into the valley. We have a leader here. I think you're going to be hearing from her, Kimberly Britton, who runs Epicenter. That is a organization, and she'll tell you more, that is small. It was created from the concept of creating more dialogue in San Antonio, and we put this ambitious goal out there to redo a power plant into this convening center. That said, that was a $55 million effort that was just taking a lot of time in terms of fundraising, when in fact we found that one of the biggest things that Epicenter can do today is help us with convening and helping us with bringing in new technologies. They're doing a very different view, and they're getting right into it. They don't need brick and mortar. They need virtualization, relationships, and communication. She just organized a call, so we had one with Jackie Sargent from Austin, Ian Taylor from New Braunfels, Phil Wilson from LCRA, and we are getting serious. And we're talking about championing these regional solutions and efforts, everything from EV network that makes it seem seamless in terms of charging and knowledge about the whole area of South Texas. We also, 35 goes up, so we'll try to venture out and make it happen elsewhere. Everything from that, though, to employees and talent development, and how can we regionally be focused on our wage scale employees and attracting more people to every facet of our technology and our industry. So you are right, it is a huge opportunity. We've been slow to do it because you can get sucked into only, again, thinking about your area, when in fact leverage and collaboration and synergies and non-silos and centers of excellence or cylinders or whatever, I'll never get that right because I hate them, those things actually pull you back. So expect to hear more from us. I'm available. Kimberly's around. We can fill you in. And then as we're making progress, I expect us to really start showing some real output later this year.
Very good. And we always talk about the I-35 corridor, but for those of you who are out of town, 281 is a much prettier drive up and down.
One thing I'd like to add, if that's okay,
you
give
have
a little
another route?
plug. So the Texas Smart Cities Summit, the first one took place last year in Austin. This year it's happening in San Antonio at the end of April. So Brian Dillard and Candelaria and Emily and that amazing team that spans across all these different agencies will be hosting it. And that is an excellent opportunity to show up, participate, tell the truth. And everyone is invited Texas-wide. And even those who don't live in Texas, you're welcome to come back.
I live here, and actually, since you brought it up, we will be hosting a South by Southwest event that first weekend, the weekend of the 13th. So since you invited everyone, all of you, it's a private event, but hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter, and we'll get you an invite. You don't need a South by Southwest badge. If you're in this room, it means you're a leading thinker, and we'd love to have you. So you talked about, that I'll go back to the I-35 corridor. We're not the only place in the country that has these cities that are near each other. Any final advice for other public utility CEOs as they embark on trying to do similar things?
Well, I will tell you it's not easy. I mean, the four entities that we talked about all have a different profile. Some don't have any generation, or some don't have any distribution system. They're selling to entities and not individual residents, things like that. But the point is, at the end of every single effort to provide power is a customer. That's universal. And so it's important for every leader to not get bogged down in their model and profile and all the things that they think are important. It is the aggregation of being able to think about Texas and being able to think about customers in Texas and what they like, and compare notes and share and just get beyond your procurement policies. You got to follow them, but you got to figure out how to make them work. Who's going to lead? How do you do a four-party promotion where, like, let's say we want to do some technology across all the entities? We again have to say yes. What are the conditions of yes? And then focus on having everybody on this field. That's the thing I would say most. Municipal entities, I think, are primed and really ready for this. We're talking about it, but not every entity has to have that structure. As far as forcing, like saying policy is the only way, and that wasn't the primary point, but policy is the only way to get people to get off their duff. I think policy is absolutely critical. We don't create policy, we do react to it. But I do think, as Carolyn said earlier, customers are demanding change and information. If we don't give them information and we don't tell them what we can do, and we don't say yes, and these are and there's more to come, that'll be the crushing blow. Now, but so again, it's a matrix. You got to have an entity that's thinking about its customers, and you got to let and inform policymakers so they can do and shape the right things. A mandate that has no technology that can actually do what is intended to do for the good doesn't matter. You got to figure out how to get there. Because really, a lot of these policies can just turn into penalties. Dollars paid for penalty, not directed back at technology, are wasted dollars. So I just say again, there really isn't any barrier. You just got to put it all together with policy, with technology, with motivation, and the perspective at the end of it. For us, we call people our customers, not just constituents or ratepayers. It just, again, drives me nuts. Customers are the driver, and they all have different needs. And they don't care that Paula Williams runs the CPS Energy entity. They receive our power from generations. What they care about is that their utility is thinking ahead and making relationships and not being siloed with solutions and just assuming that our one model will be the one attraction. Our one model is huge, but our model combined with many other entities is just exponential. The value just gets bigger than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, well said. I want to keep the show running on time, so I'll ask our panelists, do you have any final thoughts on this subject? I'll start with you, Clint.
I think that we have to move faster. When you look at the pace of the urban migration that's going on around the world, when you consider that San Antonio will have another 1 million people within a very short period of time, we're not moving fast enough. And the critical infrastructure that's needed is not yet completely coordinated. So I think the pace has to increase dramatically, and I think the concept, you mentioned China, where we probably have 4,000 lawyers, and Singapore, a couple of hundred lawyers. These are somewhat autocratic governments that can move very, very fast. There are other aspects of governance that we would never want to surrender, but we're not moving fast enough. And so it's time to move beyond the pilot stage and really start taking it up to scale in terms of coordinating the infrastructure that I mentioned in the beginning of our discussion.
Very good. Chelsea?
I could not agree more. I agree completely. And, you know, the idea that we have to incentivize each other to work together because we're deeply entrenched in these old ways of working where the individual is honored or the individual department is honored. And we will not get there fast enough unless we are working collaboratively and collectively, but we're just not used to working that way. So it's each of our individual responsibilities to understand this rapid pace of change. You know, speaking about medical knowledge, this brings it really home to me. In the 1950s, medical knowledge in medical schools was doubling at a rate of every 50 years or so. They would have to rewrite their curriculum. Guess how quickly it's doubling today in 2020? Any guesses? Every 74 days. That's the rate of change that we're operating in. So we can't pretend like it was the way it was even 10 years ago. We have to be open and willing to change and embrace change and new ways of thinking and just work together better. Our nation depends on it.
Yeah, agreed. Paula, I'll give you the final word.
I agree with everything said. Look, but I'll tell you again, look where you are. And it's going to take a lot to turn this building into a smart building. CPS Energy has the obligation to fly the plane while it's when it's up in the air, right? We can't bring the plane down, cut all the energy off, and then like run at the fastest pace. And so it may feel like we're not moving fast. I will say, fighting about change and fighting about what the next right step is and then take no step, I agree with you, that's just ridiculous. But leaning into change, because I do believe that every step we take is a build. And what we want to do is make a step from where we are, again, if we can make 10, make 10. But we have to be willing to be patient and collaborative. And I've seen the difference. Again, the thumb wars. If the fight is to win, you're only gonna like tie. If the fight is to score no matter what, you gotta be selfless, you gotta not worry about silos, and you gotta accept the fact that somebody's idea would be great and they can be in front of yours, and once you put that together as a focus, you're gonna achieve it faster, you're gonna get there faster. But the last thing I'll say is, let's not fool ourselves. We say it's about reliability, customer affordability, security, safety, environmental responsibility, and resilience. We are not, it's not like all the solutions are sitting on the shelf and all we got to do is go pick them off and we're being lazy because we won't walk to the shelf. The shelf is the inventory in the shelf is really in the build. And I want to change the dialogue on people who are actually creating technology and going to evolve it. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to be good. And then we're going to give them feedback, and it's going to get great. And then they're going to give feedback, and it's going to make a leap. And it's going to not be every 74 days. It's going to be every day. When you do that and you make energy so transactional, but it's big infrastructure, you just got to be careful. And so I say passionately, the power is in our partnership again. The power is let's be energized and passionate and collaborative and not just impatient but driven to do the right thing together and to listen to everyone and respect each other and make that progress. So we're living it here. Again, I have to say thank you to all the CPS Energy people that are living this evolution, and they are excited and passionate, and they want to hear from you. So thank you for letting me have the last word on that.
Absolutely. Great way to end the panel. So that'll do it for us. I want to thank our panelists for joining us, not just for your time today, but for what you're doing in the communities around us. And I believe we're on a networking break now, and we'll call you all back after that.